Are you tired of slow deployment cycles, tightly coupled dependencies, many external dependencies, but moreover, the constant struggle to handle a monolithic front-end code base? These are the issues that many teams face. Do you think that there is a better solution to solve this problem? Today, I want to introduce to you Micro-Frontends, an approach that could solve these persistent challenges. Imagine a world where your dependencies are loosely coupled, a world where deployment is swift and you have a fast feedback loop as a developer, and your code base is completely manageable and your cognitive load is really low. Micro-Frontends allow you to break down your monolithic code base into smaller and manageable pieces that compose your system. Each piece can be developed, tested, and deployed independently, giving you the agility that your business required in order to scale and introduce new features in this fast-paced world. It's time for you to understand more about Micro-Frontends. And in this video, I draw from the experience of the last 10 years following hundreds of teams worldwide how to use Micro-Frontends properly inside your environment. Hi, my name is Luca and I'm a serverless specialist solution architect in AWS. In the last 10 years, I had the pleasure to see the ideation of Micro-Frontends up to the maturity, and nowadays Micro-Frontends are starting to gain more traction in medium-sized and large organizations. I think Micro-Frontends are a fantastic way to address a specific problem, a scalability problem inside the organization. We have seen with microservices what you can achieve, and now we want to extend these capabilities in the front end. Back in the days when I was working in the zone as VP of architecture, I proposed an approach that was fully distributed, from microservices on the back end to Micro-Frontends on the front end. And this approach allowed us to scale our organization in a very short amount of time, from 15 tech people to 550, and enable the teams to work on their own part of the system independently. I have proof that using Micro-Frontends, you will be able to impact your delivery pipelines, introducing a fast feedback loop that will enable every team to deploy at their own pace without constant coordination across the organization. But let's start from the beginning. What are Micro-Frontends? I had to coin a definition of this approach when I was helping our engineers to build our Micro-Frontends system. And I have to create a bunch of rules and guidelines that will enable them to use them as North Star for building their system. Micro-Frontends are a technical representation of a business domain. They allow independent deployment, and they can be built with same or different technologies. Finally, they should minimize the code share, and they should be owned by a single team. As you can see here, there are a lot of keywords inside this definition. Let's start from the beginning. They are a technical representation of a business domain. Very often, we confuse Micro-Frontends and we treat them as components. A component usually leaks its domain to the container of the component, because we expose a bunch of properties, a bunch of functionalities, and then the container of the component will be able to decide how should behave that specific component in its context. With Micro-Frontends, we are taking a slightly different approach. We look at the business vocabulary, the business capabilities. We are not looking to create an abstraction of a specific feature that is merely technical. We are looking in a way that we will enable our teams to create an independent chunk that can be deployed and managed by their own without external dependencies. And that's the key difference between components and Micro-Frontends. When you find yourself to coordinate the deployment of your Micro-Frontend alongside with others, you are in a situation where your domain leaked in other domains, and then you need to go back and understand if you have defined your pieces properly. Another things that you find very easily when you do a research on micro-frontends is they are a key for working with multiple frameworks. But let's be honest, would you use multiple frameworks in a single page application, despite technically you can do that? And probably the answer is no, because we know that performance matters, and therefore you need to be mindful also in the micro-frontends to use a subset of the technologies that are aligned across the business. Then yes, obviously there might be some small libraries that can be useful for a specific area of the system, but bear in mind that thanks to this approach, because the user loads only what is needed, then you can really reach fantastic performance out of the box, only deploying micro-frontends without the need to optimize every single bit of your application. Now let's go with the controversial part, minimizing the code share. Very often developers struggle with this concept, but bear in mind that we are in a distributed system, we are not anymore in a monolithic code base. And therefore, if in a monolithic code base you have a lot of benefit of reusing code and abstracting tiny portion of your system, with the distributed system you are creating a collateral damage that is called external dependencies. You don't want to have too many of them, because otherwise you are risking that is more the burden for creating a governance to handle this external dependency than the benefit of using micro-frontends. Instead, sometimes having a bit of duplication doesn't hurt. And I know that many people are scared and afraid because we have learned about the try principle and the keys principle and all the other principles that they told us to maximize our reusability. But in distributed system, we need to think differently. We need to look into what makes us independent and reach the fast flow, because we are optimizing for another type of development. And last but not least, the ownership part. Every team should own its own micro-frontends end-to-end. And what I mean by that is that you should develop your micro-frontend, you should have a way to optimize the build phase of your automation pipeline. And last but not least, you should have a clear understanding when it's deployed, what's happening in production. You should have your dashboard. Observability is the keyword that we have fostered for several years in the microservices world, but we didn't do on the micro-frontends one. So it's time that we change this game. Another characteristic of micro-frontends is that the perfect companion when you have another distributed system. Think about microservices, for instance. Think what you are trying to achieve with them. You want to create independent teams that are capable to deliver a feature end-to-end. Now, you might argue that the backend developers in your cross-functional teams are capable to create a new API and ship it in production without the coordination of anyone. On the other side, the front-end developers usually they leverage feature flags in order to handle that specific part. And there is nothing wrong with feature flags, but there are better ways to handle that specific part. Because feature flags sometimes suffer from the fact that we are rushing to deploying a new feature. We have like a constraint on a specific deadline. And often we cannot refactor our code to clean it up and have, let's say, a very easy and manageable code base. So with micro-frontends instead, we are operating at the boundaries level. We create an independent deployable unit, and inside that you might use some feature flags, but again, the complexity of handling that it would be smaller. Also, you can de-risk the deployment of a new feature like you would do with feature flags using canary releases and blue-green deployments. Those methodologies that are very well known in the microservices world can be extremely easy to apply into the micro-frontends world. In the description of this video, I add also a project that I worked in the last few years for demystify the complexity of deploying micro-frontends with these capabilities. Enough with the theory. I wanted to show you how micro-frontends would look like in a couple of websites that I found online. I want to show you how to think and reason about micro-frontends, but more importantly, how to slice down micro-frontends. There are different approaches that you can take with micro-frontends. So let's try to dive in on these examples. Let's try to understand how we should reason when we approach a micro-frontends architecture. So I took a couple of examples. So this website I'm very familiar with is The Zone, that is the company I was working before. And here I design a micro-frontends architecture. So here, for instance, we didn't have like too many teams. We are talking about, for the web application, probably 5 or 6 teams that are working only on the web application. Obviously, we have also many other devices that we need to target, so multiple front-end teams, but in general, that was the idea. So here we structure the things based on the user journey. So First thing, the user will go into the landing page. We want to have very snappy landing page, and we didn't divided this in multiple micro-frontends. We wanted to have something that was highly cacheable. So therefore, we created one micro-frontend that is loaded by the application shell, that is the entire landing page. Now, when the user selects sign up, for instance, we will move to another journey, the sign up journey. So that is very important, because before, when we were thinking about components, what we were looking into the page is, okay, so this one potentially can be a component and this one can be another one. But with micro-frontends, we know that if we treat components in the same way of micro-frontends, then we are going to have someone, the container of these components, that know how these components should behave. And therefore, we start to leak domain to another team, or even worse, another part of the system, and therefore we need always to deploy everything together. So better to co-locate those information, because in reality they are coupled. So the container needs to know what kind of components are loaded and how they should behave, and therefore every time that you change a component, it's very likely that you're going to change also the container of these components. Now, when we move instead into this sign-up journey, we load another micro-frontend. Once again, this is owned by another team, and this team is responsible for what? For all these views. What it means is that basically this team is now responsible for the plan, create account, payment details, and all the UIs that related to the sign-up journey that contains all the dependencies of the sign-up journey. So this team is now responsible for selecting the plan, moving into the creation of the account, and obviously they can have multiple components, I don't know, something like that, or in different way to structure, doesn't really matter. So the user now, if he sign up, will load the dependency of this part of the system. If instead the user wants to sign in, it's easy because it's an existing user. So for instance, all the SDK related to the integration with payment methods or PayPal, wherever, are not loaded at all in this specific experience. So in this case, we are going to have this component here. If the user forgot the password, can go inside this other view with another state, etc., etc., etc. So what we'll have in this work that we call vertical split is basically a scenario like this. We have a user that first goes into the landing page. Okay, from here the user can select to go into sign up journey if it's a brand new user, and otherwise it will go into the sign in journey. Both will redirect the user into the authenticated area, that in this case is just a catalog. Now here comes the interesting part. Next time that the user wants to go into this website, it doesn't need anymore these parts, and not even the landing page. The user will be redirected straight, because he has a token and all the authentication authorization related to it, to the catalog. So all these dependencies, all this code won't be loaded. It will load only this part. So as you can see, there is a clear advantage compared to single-page application in the client-side rendering world. But let's move for a second on the server-side rendering world with an example of an e-commerce. I just take a generic one because I always think that everyone is familiar with the e-commerce, therefore it's easy to think about it. So here, for instance, the first thing that people would tend to do is, if I'm thinking in components, is that this one is a hero banner and this one is a carousel. And this one is another type, like a grid or whatever it is. That's completely not related to micro-frontends. This is a component approach. What about micro-frontends? Oh, so first, this seems very independent. This is everything related to products. All the new products are here. We have obviously an expression of data that are related into a banner, that is the hero banner, and then we have a carousel. Yes, absolutely. Great. I expect that I have a cross-functional team that can handle the backend of these products and also the front end that is expressed in different ways. And you see in this page, we have product here, we have product also here, camera drones. We have product also here when we have handled daily vlogging pro shooting. They are just the same thing that you will find in the catalog, but shown in a different way. So the team responsible for that is very likely that they're going to handle this part. We have also a bunch of other things. We have this part that is interactive with a bunch of information related to the store. So probably this one can be a good candidate for a micro-frontend. Again, candidate because there isn't right or wrong in when we are designing these things. We need to drill down into the context in order to understand what we should do. At this stage here, instead, we have potentially a banner that can be easy to solve with a simple JSON that loads a specific a configuration that loads a specific image. So probably this will change based on the season or based on the month of the year, based on the personalization requirements that the teams has. So as you can see here, we don't need to overcomplicate and treat everything as a micro-frontend. We can always use what we are used to do in the past. At the bottom of this page, we have a bunch of other things. So as you can see, we have concept of services, education, and buying guides. So here, interestingly enough, if we take the example of education, this team, potentially, let's call team A, is responsible for this part of the system. And when we go to the education area, that is here, this team is also responsible for this page, the education page. And they have, let's say, their own UI that is different from the rest of the application. The header and the footer are exactly the same across the entire application, so it's very likely that could be embedded into the application shell or the container of my micro-frontends that is responsible to load the header and footer, but also loading the right micro-frontend for a specific URL. So this team is completely independent, can develop wherever they want in the way that they want, no problem at all. When instead we select with another team, let's call team B, that is responsible for the products. So team B now is, when I click on one of them, I will go on a specific category, and this camera and gimbal, in this case, the one that I selected, that has its own UI, its own components inside, and that can be another micro-frontend owned by the same team. As you can see now, the team has enough ground to define how their website or part of the website looks like, define their own states, reusing the knowledge that they have. The only thing that they need to understand is how to plug into the application shell. That is usually an easy step, depends from the technology that you're using, but in general, as you can see, is not very complicated. Don't be fooled by the idea that you treat components like micro-frontend. Micro-frontends are different from components. We need to look into the way how we are structuring and decoupling the information, because it's very likely that if we do that, we are matching our strategy on the data side or the API side, where we have, let's say, a team that are responsible for a specific portion of the business and not the entirety. If we go to granular using the components approach, then we are going to have a lot of external dependencies, and we are invalidating this approach of independency that micro-frontends are bringing on the table. I hope that this simple explanation will help you to rationalize better how to treat micro-frontends over components. But now we need to discuss more. You might ask yourself when to use a vertical split over an horizontal split, and many people are asking about that. Usually the number of teams working on the micro-frontends project is a good indicator. Think about that. If you're responsible, for instance, about the reviews of an e-commerce, then that reviews micro-frontend will be able to be loaded independently with just a bunch of information needed in order to contextualize what it needs to display, and you will be able to show it across multiple views. But maybe you are not a large organization, maybe you are a mid-sized organization, and you can clearly see the benefit of deploying independently chunk of the system. So in this case, a vertical split is a fantastic approach, because you can take a specific area of your system, deploy independently, and maybe you have at the end 2 or 3 micro websites or micro-frontends in this case, where you would be able to leverage the capabilities offered by micro-frontends. A classic example that I've seen very often applied with this approach is server-side rendering. So when you are using frameworks like Next or Astro, using this approach enables you to really have a portion of the system, so de-risking the deployment of your micro-frontends without affecting the rest of the system. These enable cross-functional teams to be completely independent. They can develop their APIs, they can build the micro-frontends, they can deploy both, and the coordination, the fast feedback loop that we said before, is a extremely simple. Bear in mind, there isn't a solution that fits them all. You can even mix and match those two approaches. Maybe some part of your system are more complicated and multiple teams needs to work together. Other parts of the system are more common or easy to develop, and there is an initial investment of developing these parts, but then it just keeps the lights on. And it's fine. In either case, you can use a vertical and horizontal approach in the same system. Usually, it's quite common in micro-frontends that you have a core team that is responsible for the cross-cutting concerns. Think about, for instance, the application shell that contains your micro-frontend. Think about the reviewing the optimization and performance overall of the platform. Think about the end-to-end testing on how to load different micro-frontends. As you can imagine, there are a lot of cross-cutting concerns that we need to take into account in micro-frontends because we want to have independent teams, but we cannot enable them if there is a duplication everywhere. So think about design systems. We need to have a way to enable the teams to have always the latest and greatest version of the design system. Think about logging and all the observability libraries that you want to have inside micro-frontends. You want to create a unique system for that. You want to have an application shell that is owned by a single team. So all these capabilities has to be owned by this platform team or core team. And this team is responsible not only for that, but also to foster the right mindset within teams. We need also to have this team that is creating the commonalities across micro-frontends and trying to be as unaware as possible about the business domains. Therefore, your platform team should create an application shell that is very unaware of what's happening inside that. It could be that application or another one. It shouldn't make any difference. Moreover, this team should look into performance of the overall system. They should surface design patterns that are happening inside the different teams. They should provide guidance on how to automate certain practices that we want to see inside our organization. Think about, for instance, the budget size of your micro-frontends, and so on and so forth. On top of that, we have our streamlined teams that are working on the domains and working on the micro-frontends. They should have blueprints for quickly spin up a new micro-frontend. They should have the possibility to take the shot inside their micro-frontend and respect the boundaries, having an automation pipelines that works for them to enforce certain characteristics. As we said, the latest version of the design system. Or we want to say, okay, so every time that you deploy a micro-frontend, we want to make sure that you can only deploy iteratively. So a certain percentage of the live traffic will see your new version of micro-frontends only on a specific browser or only in a specific country. All these characteristics has to be thought and take into account in order to enable the teams to work and focus on what really matters, the code inside the micro-frontend, more all the other concerns that can be easily automated without any problem. You might think by now, how many companies are using micro-frontends nowadays? But there are several case studies around that. There is website like Expedia or Booking.com, American Express, PayPal, DAZN, Netflix, and many others. As you can see, the list is pretty huge. These companies are all using this approach for improving the throughput of their teams and create an environment where they foster innovation. They allow teams to take the shot, to have skin in the game, and have the possibility to really create something that is epic. There isn't a solution that fits them all when we speak about distributed system, and that means also for micro-frontends. It's a powerful tool, but as any other tool, we should use wisely and when it's really needed. Distinguish micro-frontends from components is the first step, and usually is the biggest mistake that many companies are doing. What we need to look at is independent deployable unit that will enable any team to work at their own pace and deploy independently. Effective governance is extremely important with micro-frontends because we don't want to create silos. We want to create an harmonious system that will work for us and can be scaled based on the requirements that the business have. You need to embrace the change and make sure that you are reflecting those changes inside the organization and the way how you are designing your system. And finally, remember that your culture, organization, and architecture are linked together. Every time that you touch one of those dimensions, the other two will have an impact, positive or negative. Therefore, never look in silos, because the technical decision is not just that. It might affect other dimensions. Remember, change is not just necessary, it's inevitable. Embrace it and let micro-frontends and distributed system be your companion to evolve your knowledge and your organizations. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next episode of My 50 Cents.